were you one of those kids that sort of like grew up with a camera in your hand, or how did that journey with video start?
Ooh, so I was actually the kid who, like, if you'd asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would have said inventor because I was constantly collecting toilet paper rolls and like making paper airplanes and seeing what would fly farther. My favorite place ever in the world ever is my garage, just with the music on, me cutting a piece of wood, trying to like make a catapult or something. Because you kind of lose track of time. You fade away into just this thing that you're building. And so I didn't discover video until two things happened. Um, One, I was a peer counselor in high school because a friend of mine said, "Oh, this is really cool. You get to stay at school for another hour. Awesome!" And so we would be the kids that would kind of take aside these kids who needed help, who were going through some family troubles or whatever, and we'd just be there for them because they didn't have other people to be there for them. And I was like, "This is so freaking cool that you can kind of be there for someone in this way." But at the same time, I had a video project where we had to make a project about birds, and we had to learn about video editing and stuff if we wanted extra credit, like make a video about it. So we did that, and I was like, "This is awesome." We like made ourselves into like these talking visual effects, like an egg, like with eyes and faces and stuff. And then I kind of put two and two together, realizing you could make videos online and it could scale the impact that you could have on one person. And we got lucky that we actually went semi-viral in 2008-ish, right when YouTube was just a couple years old. I think we had a couple hundred thousand, 100,000 plus views on YouTube. We joined this like video contest, and it was such a cool experience seeing people who I'd never met before messaging me or like coming up to me at these inter high school events. They're like, "I go to this other high school, you never met me, but you're the guy who made that video yesterday." And that really made an impact on me. So that was the point where I go like, dang, this is so cool. I want to do more of this. And kind of, yeah, kind of planted the seed for me trying to like find my way back to that. Going to college, doing engineering, did startups and tech for a while. And then from there, decided I'm just going to go be a YouTuber. No idea how I'm going to monetize this thing, but like art and meaning and money will show up. I didn't have any idea what I was doing. No idea how to sustain like an economic like venture that I was doing. And so decided I got to figure out, how to put together a business that can sustain the meaning that I wanted to have in the world. Um, and yeah, so that's how I ended up today teaching people how to build studios so that they can look their best, so they can reach an audience, and really kind of learning for myself, actually, really cementing this idea every single time I kind of learn about it deeper and deeper that like all we're doing here is we're just a bunch of people on a rock, and we're helping like each other out. We're talking to each other and relating to each other. And as much as we try to engineer marketing or we try to engineer like how our product sales funnels go, it's really just talking to people and being there for people and relating to them, that like you can't engineer all this stuff. It's more that heart to heart relational piece that we get to scale with the fact that we can do video. It's kind of cool. I think about it as like time travel meets space travel, because you can talk to someone through a video 20 years in the future, right? Like your video is still going to be there,
Interesting. Yeah,
and you can talk to them 2,000 miles away, right? And so it's space travel and time travel. Like,
totally. Obvious question. Why not study film at USC? Why did you hang on to the engineering degree?
so funny story. I actually didn't get into film school. So I applied to USC because it was a film school. My parents are like, if you do directing a film and stuff, just know it's going to be really hard. You should have some kind of a technical skill. So I didn't really know what to do. So I was like, I like making stuff in the garage. So I did mechanical with the idea that like once I got there, I would try to do film too. I realized mechanical engineering nowadays just means clicking on stuff on the computer, doing like simulations and tests. And I was like, this isn't really what I wanted to do. So I applied to film school, and I had some stuff that I thought would be more like filmy. I didn't submit any of my YouTube stuff. I submitted more like filmy stuff that I've done. Didn't get accepted, was a little bit bummed out, but then immediately realized since I had nothing left to lose, I would try the one thing that I swore I would never ever do, which would be like a computer nerd. So I learned coding and just like, oh my God, it's like Legos, but on the computer. And so that's kind of how I ended up doing computer science for the next couple of years.
Okay, that's wild. The video
Yeah.
guy who didn't get into USC film school. It's
And
their
the thing
their
about that
loss.
is, like, I did take a lot of film classes, and this might be just a part of me justifying like why I didn't get in, but I genuinely feel like it's taken some time for Hollywood to adjust to the fact that media is changing. And like it's such a different mentality doing YouTube content versus like film specifically. Because if you think about YouTube and you think about film, it's kind of like an analogy to just letters and words, right? If you tell someone like I know how to read and write, you don't expect all of them to be poets. You don't expect all of them to write emails all day. You don't expect all of them to like write receipts, right? Like they all have different uses and like purposes for that medium, but they all use the same letters and numbers. So with video, I think YouTube is such a big place where people think if you're doing YouTube, it means it's one thing, but it's really so many different things you could do, right? Some people, they put like showcases of their real estate there for you to buy it. Some people, they put recipes. Some people, it's marketing content. Some people, it's like documenting their life, documenting different calls they've had, different sales calls, different, all these different things. There's not like one specific way to use the video medium.
That makes sense. That's interesting. When did you feel like you became an expert? Was it at university while you were taking some classes or afterwards?
Honestly, I still don't feel like I'm an expert. I think this is something that I think most people who do this kind of stuff resonate with. I don't think we ever become an expert because the more you know, it's like that common thing, the more you know that you don't know. And so the only way that I'm actually comfortable putting our stuff out there and like working with people who want to pay us is by hearing other people who I trust going, oh my God, working with you was the best thing ever. You know so much more than me. That's the only way that I go, I know enough to be of value to people. So yeah, like it's that imposter syndrome thing. Like I don't think I'm an expert.
How did Dreamcore Studio come about? Like, what was that inflection point, and how would you sort of describe what you guys do?
Yeah. It's funny, everyone calls it Dream Course Studio. We need to change the
Is
name.
that not what it's called? I thought that's what it
Dream
was called.
Studio, and it's a course about building your
Dream
dream studio.
Studio. I call it Dreamcore Studio. That's funny.
Studio of your dreams. That's why we got to change it to just Dream Studio. So I got the domain dreamstudio.co. We have to change our domain soon. But anyways,
You know
dreams.
what's funny though? When I first saw it, right? I first saw it and then I like lost it and I was trying to find it. And I kept
Hmm.
Googling like Hollywood Studio, like what was it called? Because it has that Hollywood feel to it.
Thanks, man. That's what we try to say. Like, make your videos at home look like Hollywood. But the idea is like studio of your dreams. Okay, let's do like dream studio, like your dream home. But evidently, we're not explaining it well enough because you're not the first person who said that. Like everyone's calling it that. Um, but anyways, what was your question?
How did Dream Studio? How did that come about? Like, what's the sort of origin story there? Was it intentful or is it almost like an accidental business? Like, how did you kind of sort of come up with it?
Yeah, to be honest, I was building this as like my practice business. And it was where I had quit my job. I was in a cybersecurity startup. And I was like, I don't think this is going where it needs to go. I don't think the market is responding. And also, just personally, I just felt like I wanted to do something that I really cared about with my 20s before it was over. So I just quit to do YouTube. I had that film background, so I just thought I'd just make stuff and like I wanted to do sort of this content that would give people a hug like in their feed as like they're scrolling. Most of the times people are really kind of feeling like they're trying to escape their normal life by scrolling. And in most of the cases, people want something that makes them feel better. And so I wanted to like give people a hug through video, whatever that looks like. Evidently that didn't make any money. So I was living in San Francisco. I drained like probably 100K in my savings, just like living in San Francisco, going to conferences, trying to invest in all this gear and tech and everything. Was headed back to like rock bottom again, zero. And a mentor of mine was telling me like, hey, like, what are people asking for help with? Like, how do you need to fit into the world to make money? Because you need to learn that skill in order to actually do anything in your life. And so I'm like, that makes sense. In order for me to do anything that I want to do, I need to know how to sustain it. But the people that were asking me for help were asking me like, how do I do videos better? How do I do studios? And at the time, I'm like, I'm never going to be the studio guy. That sounds like something a total nerd would do. That's not me. I'm so much bigger than that, so much more like, there's so many more facets to who I am. And then it's kind of magical what financial pressure does to you. Like it helps you to focus on all these things that you would love to have, and you go, what are the things that I need to have? And so I realized in order for me to do anything I want to in my life, I need to learn the skill of like, how does a business work? How does money work? So I thought like, okay, people are asking me to pay me to coach them on this stuff. I'll just do this. So I learned the skill of where money comes from. And then I can kind of reorient that spigot towards the things I care about and like the mental health side of things. Um, Turns out as I started doing that, I started kind of getting passionate about the fact that business is like a puzzle, and it's almost like gardening or taking care of a like a Tamagotchi or a Pokemon. Like it's always with you, and you're kind of always taking care of it, and it grows, and it's really cool. So that's honestly, like, if I'm honest about it, like that's how we started. It was just a need during the pandemic, especially where a video that I had made previously about how I set up my videos went viral, a couple 100,000 views. And then people, yeah, were just like, hey, can I pay you to hop on Zoom for an hour? I was like, you want to pay me for that? Oh, well, okay. And it's kind of spun off to now where we've built studios for some of the, biggest podcasts, and a lot of people who are like executives at some of the biggest companies, the biggest VC firms. And it's just kind of been pretty cool to see all these people I used to look up to now as just people I could just text and be like, hey, I have a question, or like, yo, like, just be friends with everybody. Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it sounds like the side effects of what you're doing is sort of so in your element, right? Like you're meeting people who are doing important things, and those are relationships that are you're sort of forging even after you probably help them set up their studio.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like internet friends are so awesome. I never really had internet friends before I did all this stuff. And people who aren't showing up on video, I don't think they get how crazy cool it is to have internet friends, because it's like everyone is watching, and like the top whatever percent of people are actually making, but those are the only people out there who everyone else interacts with.
Yeah.
And they interact with each other. And so like pretty much once you start making stuff, if you have a podcast, if you have a YouTube channel or whatever, you can start interacting on like a level basis with every other person out there who's making stuff. And yeah, it's just crazy. You can just become really good friends with people who you've looked up to, and you're like, wow, you're like this internet star, and they're just regular people like you, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
I don't never mention this, but like the guy who is I consider my podcast mentor is someone who I reached out to because I saw that he had like 5 kids. I think we might have had one, maybe two at the time. Maybe we just had our second. And it looked like he was starting a podcast, and he had this full-time job, and he had like 5 daughters. And I'm like, how does he do this? He's a machine. And it's someone I talk to like regularly. We've actually never even met yet, but like, then he's got this big time leadership podcast. It's amazing. But you talk about meeting people that you would have thought you would have never met, who have like I would say like a pretty big influence on your life. You just never know, right? Until you kind of take that step forward, whatever creative pursuit that might be.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. Like it keeps coming back to people. And like as much as I try to take an engineer's perspective to things, like this is a business, I'm building this machine, and it's like at the end of the day, like you can just be people, and that's often what you need to do to make it work. And it's like just flowing with that. Like we're just human beings on a rock. No one's like that much better or that much worse than anybody else. It just kind of like that's oftentimes like just the perspective shift where everything just clicks, and you're like, oh, it's just way simpler than I thought it was.
Yeah, I'm sure there's many like mental models or frameworks, even in like computer science. I think of that book, like How to Think Like a Rocket Scientist, right?
Mm,
By Ozan Varol, I think is his name. But I'm sure there's like principles that you've learned just with that degree and that background that help, I imagine.
yeah. Especially with delegating. Now with ChatGPT, we were just talking before this call, like it's freaking crazy. And I think learning how to guide the guide the thinking process is different than how to think, because thinking is kind of doing the mental legwork of putting these two ideas together and like searching for other things that are related. But guiding that process is like, all right, hey, let's define what exactly are you trying to do? What are the things that you would need to know in order to figure out what to do? Right? Those things aren't actually doing the processing. It's like figuring out what the process should be, or what the processing that needs to be done should be. And that's, I think, one of the big things that I learned from computer science. Like, how do you delegate to, whether it's your teammates or whether it's delegating to a computer? It's like that bigger, big picture skill set of what is the problem that needs to be solved to figure out what the problem is that needs to be solved.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny. Okay, on the idea of a quality video setup, based on your experience so far, what do you think is the biggest either misconception or barrier for people to make that change?
Mm. I think the biggest misconception is that you have to do it like everybody else. And it's like people think that they can just go on YouTube and just copy paste something. And that's why you see so many people with what I call like the beginner YouTuber look. You have these people who are like these, like
Tell me about this.
but really like mature, like personal finance people, or the people who are like trying to sell you a house, or like people who need to show up really credible, but they set up their shots like they're like, oh yeah, I'm on YouTube now, and they have like an 8-year-old's gamer setup, and it just like doesn't match. And that's kind of the funny way to think about it. But also on the deeper side of things, I always tell people your studio is supposed to be an asset. Really, like, what is the purpose of a studio? It's not just to look good. That is a huge reason to do it, but it's also because you want to produce content to show up and actually participate in the internet, to be the part of that top 10 or 1% of people who are actually contributing. And with that comes all these rewards, right? But so many people build a studio, build a setup that gets in their way. They add bottlenecks to their process that makes them less able to perform, less able to show up. When they finally cobble together their setup by picking out where in their house to do it, hastily cleaning up, kind of feeling like crap because their wall looks bad, that they like everything looks so bad and they're struggling with all the settings. 8 hours later, when it's finally done, they're like sweaty, frustrated, their brain is already taxed to the max, that they can't even talk coherently. And so it just kind of kills that entire momentum. When in reality, a studio should be something that should take the place of like 5 team members, right? The person managing the camera and camera settings, the person managing the lighting design, someone to come in and do the audio, someone to do the set design, and someone also to manage how you are acting on camera, because you're the talent, right? So, sorry.
No, it makes sense. It also makes me, as you were describing that, it makes me think of that whole like sort of Steve Jobs theory of like, you shouldn't spend your brain power on what you're going to wear every day. And so like, if you do, you're going to have less willpower. Your fuse is going to be shortened by the time you even get in front of the camera, because you've had to manage all this other stuff and you're spending brain power on things you didn't think you needed to.
Yeah, and it's almost like if you were to start a restaurant, you wouldn't think like, do I need to have a location? It's like, yeah, you need a location to participate in being a restaurant. And I think to show up on the internet, a studio is kind of like, you step into the studio and it's your broadcast portal. And I think people think it's just a thing that makes you look nice. But what happens is, if you don't have that portal optimized to working for you, it actually works against you. And it's like, it's almost like a spaceship that keeps breaking down versus one that, has all the buttons right where you need them based on how long your arms are, what are the keys that you use the most often in your spaceship. And that's kind of the nice thing of like, you yourself are the person that's showing up on camera, but there's so many things that need to be done in order for you to do that best, right? You can't have an hour's worth of tech setup you have to do every time, plus an hour's worth of lighting touch-ups you have to do every time, plus like you trying to figure out what, clean up your background, all this stuff. The fact that you have a place that you just come to and it's always you in the shot, your physical height doesn't change, your complexion doesn't change, the acoustics of the space never change. So you can design it once and eliminate having to have a camera operator, lighting designer, set designer, audio person, and a director too, right? And that's like the other piece that so many people don't understand it with a studio is there's a deeper workflow piece involved. So I got diagnosed with ADHD about a year ago. And to me, it's not something that's like, oh, I have ADHD, I'm gonna shirk all my responsibilities. It's become this thing where I go, my brain works differently. So I have to use a different set of brain manuals to accommodate for it so that I can go even farther and faster. And so I found like I've gotten super interested in how different people's brain works. And to show up differently in different contexts, we need to show up with different set of tools to help us perform in those contexts. So we have different contexts like Zoom calls, a YouTube video, a course, consulting calls, news appearances. We have a lot of people we work with who launch a book and they have like 40 news appearances, right? So there's like different contexts in which they need to see different things, right? So sometimes on a podcast, like I'm looking directly at you so that it feels more natural. So it doesn't feel like I'm thinking about make eye contact, and it brings the best out of me seeing your face there, right? But some people, they also need to see notes. Some people, they need to have something to lean on. Some people like me, I noticed this. If my desk doesn't have like a soft surface on it with this desk mat and it's just hard, I would not want to be here. It would just kind of subconsciously make me feel more stressed out. And then when I got this soft thing, I kind of go like, I'm at home here. I don't have to feel stressed out, and it grounds me. And so all of this stuff is the studio too. It's the workflow that allows me to pump out content easier, faster, and more frequently to just show up more and then reap all the rewards that kind of come with that.
Yeah. It's one of the most interesting parts about the experience, speaking from my own experience, was kind of getting the look that you want in the constraints that you have. Because I think most people that you work with they're working from home somewhere, right? So they've got to make it work. But then the iteration to me was also fun. I know you say like, I want you to order all this stuff and then like go back to return it one time. I mean, like Dave and I in our class, we're going back and forth. Like I've probably gone back 10 times to return stuff. But to be honest, it was kind of fun, like iterating. Like I didn't really want 4 tripods in my office. I'm like, okay, talking to peers, like, what are you using for this? What kind of stand are you using for that? Like, how can I make it fit and iterate once I have the look? And to me, that's sort of the fun part, to your point, to like make it more seamless and frictionless every time I turn this on, because I don't want to just use it for a podcast. I want people to feel like I respect them and I'm going to use it anytime I'm talking to almost anybody. Like I want them to feel that way. That buddy of mine I was telling you about earlier, he's got a pretty good video set up, and I asked him, like, how often do you use it? And he said, if someone wants to just like ask me for career advice, maybe they listen to my podcast, I use it even. And then we get on and they're like shocked because I'm in the same setup that I'm in interviewing a CEO of an airline or something like that. And he's like, I do it out of respect for them because I want them to also feel like it's not, you don't have to be a CEO for me to turn the lights on and turn on the camera. So I feel like there's so many things we can talk about, but I do feel like if you can iterate to where it's seamless as the person in front of the camera and make it feel inviting to the other side, that's maybe the barrier. If I'm hearing you, the barrier is thinking that it's a lot of work every time I need to get in front of the camera. And you're saying there's a lot of deep work in the beginning, but then you make it seamless to turn the lights on and turn the camera on once you get it set up.
Yeah. I mean, like that's something that's just like, think about how much it costs to hire a videographer every time, but also to like waste all that time not filming content. Just like the time of the delay of showing up on camera, but also how many opportunities you're going to give up because you're like, I don't want to show up. Or like we've had folks that we've worked with who go, Kevin, like I filmed my online course twice and I'm still too embarrassed to post it. So I think I'm going to delete it again. And it's like, you put in all this work, the money is like ready for you to start collecting because you made all this stuff and you can just give the value to people. But it's like, it's so costly to not have something that lets you just actually show up. It's almost like having a car. Like before I had a car, I couldn't go to these places where things were happening, like meeting people that I needed to meet to further my career, go on dates to further my dating life, to even go to the supermarket to get healthier stuff than delivery Uber Eats that was killing my wallet, right? It allows you to show up and like it's like going to conferences too. Like the top people in the world are doing this. And if you want to participate, you need your own little portal to do that.
Yeah.
And oh, like showing respect for people and kind of that warmth. It's also crazy if you think about it. You can affect someone's biochemistry by how you set up your studio, right? So if you think about two situations, like if you're in a gas station with like flickering green fluorescent lights, it's 2 a.m. and someone walks up to you, you're like, I don't want to talk to you. You have your defenses up. You're just trying to get out alive, right? Versus if you're in a ski lodge in Tahoe at this nice networking thing, you have this nice jazz music and like a fireplace and the lights are dim. Everything around you is like warm, woolly, fuzzy fabrics. You're going to be more in open connecting mode, right? So your biochemistry is very different in both situations. And when you think about how to interact with people online, if everything is about people and we want to kind of show up in a way that builds relationships, if you can kind of decide or if you can design the biochemical state of every person that you interact with so that they feel calm and they feel for some reason like they have a connection with you, they feel open and curious rather than shut down, and also you so that they just feel like there's something about you that makes them want to connect with you. That's like basically a superpower. Like every salesperson listening to this should be like, holy cow, that is whoa, right? And every person who wants to have some kind of impact or some kind of a, like if you're trying to build an influence, like those are the things that matter most, because then we use our logic to kind of to add a logical reason after we already feel a certain way about somebody. So a studio is awesome because you don't even have to like, you don't even have to come in like preparing yourself for anything. It's just always there.
Yeah.
Imagine if you never have to cut your hair ever again, and it's your hair is just permanently there that way. That's kind of how I see a studio.
I love that. You mentioned something I think is actually hugely important. I remember a long time ago, I was at some like internal sales meetup, sales leadership, all that stuff at work. And we were able to ask someone who was like an advisor to CMOs questions. And the question I asked was like, what advice do you have to maybe, and I mean this in an ethical way, but like disarm an executive, like just to get them to like open up and be more sort of welcoming. And to your point, like if it looks like you're sitting at the kitchen table and there's like a shadow against you, people can't see you, compare that to a studio that feels warm and inviting. That's a very different, almost unconscious, like, head start if you invest the time to set up your studio appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, like Hollywood knows this. Like those are the elements they use to make villains more scary.
Yeah.
They shine lights on them in a certain way. They do certain things to make them fade into the shadows. They do certain things to make them look less trustworthy by like something just feels off about them. All these different things, like so many people do unconsciously, like even with the angle of the camera, like looking down at you on the camera, right? People do these things that frame themselves as not just a stranger, but like a villain.
Yeah.
Like, why are you
Yeah.
guys doing this?
That's funny. Let me
Yeah.
ask you this. So I think this is interesting and important, and it's sort of caught me off guard. There's this kind of theory that you have in the course. I'd love for you to unpack it a little bit for people to learn about it. And I might be butchering it somewhat, but it's something like, your studio is really, it's not 100% the quality of your camera or even the lens, right? It's something like 33% camera, 33% lighting, 33% decor. And again, I might have butchered it, but like, can you unpack that sort of idea? Because I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think a lot of people when they get into video, they go, "Oh, video, that means camera." So I just drop all my money on a camera and that'll fix everything. But a lot of times if you just have a really nice camera, so most people think a camera just means megapixels or like how much resolution. If you point like a high resolution camera at an ugly setup, it's just more resolution of an ugly setup. And it's just like people can more clearly see how messy the space is. And you kind of want to think, okay, what am I pointing the camera at? Right? Those are equally important. And to kind of dive in a little bit more, people like drastically underestimate how important lighting is, right? Because it's not something you see in the shot. And so we oftentimes go, oh, lighting is just something, as long as you can see the person, that's good enough. And some people sit with their sun behind them or like in a window, and like you can't even see them. There's not even enough lighting in the first place. Right? Super witness protection program vibes. And so that's why I tell people, if you're feeling lost and kind of confused, my biggest number one thing with every client and student we work with is like, I know this is a lot. This is technical stuff that requires years of training to be like an audio engineer, a camera person, settings, lighting designer, interior designer, and like experienced designer, right? For online events and hosting like calls and showing up on camera. That's a lot. So my number one thing is I want to reduce the overwhelm for you. And how do you get to this result of having a studio without the headache and frustration? And one of the big things is helping them see that, okay, you don't have to do all this stuff at once. Just get to like good enough in different areas. And kind of this is how to approach it. So from zero, number one, the first thing to do is remove all the things that would actively push people away from you. So the hardest thing to pay attention to when you're trying to watch a video, it hurts to listen to bad audio. Like you can look at a fuzzy video for a little bit, but bad audio physically hurts. So get rid of using the onboard mic on your laptop or on a camera, and invest, even if you don't have a lot of budget, just invest in like a little microphone. So audio, getting the microphone closer to you or having a higher quality mic, those are the two things that will kind of get rid of the downside. Now, investing in the upside is the next thing. And the biggest thing that people don't realize is lighting, right? And I tell people more lights is more important than more light. So as a fundamental principle to tie everything together, you kind of saw in the course, but people don't realize it's how do we create depth in a shot? So everything that we do is to help the person's cognition, right? Like to help them understand and digest the information that we have faster. Whether that's information about like technical information of what we're trying to present to them, like informational information, or emotional information. Like, hey, this is a place where you can just be yourself. Or I relate to you because I'm in the same boat. You can trust me. Or I've been where you've been. All those things, right? Those are all things we want to get the person to understand. That kind of stuff, to make it land, we have to kind of tell the brain what's important. So that's what depth is. We want to make some stuff on screen pop and some stuff recede. So that's why when you look at a webcam, it looks so cheap and digital because everything is sharp and everything is a little bit jumbled and it just like there's too much information. It's like looking at a poster where everything is bold and the same big text. It's just too much. But with lighting, it's one of those things that helps you to kind of show what things are popping out in 3D space. So as like a super basic demonstration here, like one of my favorite lights to show people is this top light, right? I turn it off and like my shot looks way flatter. I have some other lights also creating depth on me right now, but this light right here, if I turn it back on, right, it's like, oh my God, there's so much more depth. And then you think about the connotations of it too, which is when do you ever see someone lit from above? It's in nature, like in real life, right? So it's like, oh, this is real. It's not through a screen. It's like how we normally are intended to see each other. But in other cases, it's seeing someone on a stage, seeing something exhibited at a museum, seeing an expert or like an artist like singing or performing. These are all places where we pay good money to see the person and we know we have to pay attention, right? And so all these things kind of come together like in all these different areas of lighting, camera, and audio, all these different things, like thinking intentionally about how we design the experience. I'm totally going off on a tangent, but like circling back, there are all these different pieces that have to be done kind of with intentionality, but in a way that relate to the other pieces.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense. I mean, I think the misconception is like, it's 100% your camera. I didn't think I'd spend so much time on the background, right? And I think the other interesting thing for most people is they're going to, like me, you're going to have some kind of constraint. Like this is the office and I have these pieces of furniture, nailed to the wall essentially, right? Already. So like, I can't really move them. I can move my desk. So how can I create the space with the constraints that I have? And I think it was really fun with you and the team to think about, okay, you have a bookshelf, but like, you don't have to just treat it like a regular bookshelf, right? Or like, how do you create shadows? How do you add greenery in a way that feels natural? All those things, like I would have thought, hey, if I invest 10K in a camera, I should be good. I didn't think so much of everything else, really, even the lighting, to be honest. So I thought that was really sort of eye-opening, maybe even for most people who have no background in photography or videography.
Yeah. It's like if you blow up like if you blow up a picture of garbage and put it on a billboard, it's still just like a nicer picture of garbage. A bigger
100%.
picture, right? Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned you've worked with a lot of people. I'm curious, what is one sort of piece of feedback or case study, something you've heard from someone that you've worked with that really kind of stands out to you that like, hey, this is making a pretty cool impact?
Mm,
I know I'm probably asking you to like pick your favorite baby, but like, and maybe there's more than one. That's fine.
yeah. One thing that I've heard from a couple people, they're like, do you realize how much money is being spent on people like looking good in person? Your studio, like people aren't really spending that much money on it, but it's really your new suit. Like people spend thousands of money on a suit, or think about like makeup, getting your hair done, getting, even just like getting a haircut. Or if you think realtors, like realtors pay a lot of money to show up in a really nice car when they're, showing people their houses. And why do we do that? It's because we want to show up as successful, because people don't want to work with a realtor who looks like they've never done business before, right? Or like have a very like, trashy track record of like driving a Camry. No offense to anyone who drives a Camry. But like you want to show up in a way that says, I have the um, I have the work ethic to produce results, and I've done so, because it signals that, hey, I've actually like have something very valuable for you that I've put a lot of effort into. It also says like I have the attention to detail to kind of really think through what you need, and I'm here for you, right? And all this intentionality, it's all signaling, right? And so they were telling me like, this really is your suit. And multiple people have kind of said that. And for me, never having worked in the corporate world, I don't really personally associate like going to work and wearing a suit, right? Um, but it really is kind of like the same thing. And slowly, I think people are realizing that we live in a video first world, right? And you can actually go so much farther and meet so many more people through a video than you could possibly shaking hands. And sure, shaking hands allows you to kind of be there face to face for a brief moment, but you're not going to be shaking hands for like 50 minutes a day but that's what you're doing when you have a podcast. You're spending 50 minutes a day with the person, right? You're spending like however much time as they're watching your videos, seeing you on social media, reading your newsletters with, your face in it and everything. We can actually, we have more, I guess, social surface area when we show up on video than real life. And so the amount of money that we're spending is so disproportionately allocated towards real life right now that people, I don't think, have caught on and realized this. But the folks that we've worked with some of the biggest like VC firms, worked with some of the biggest companies, and they're the people that get it. They're like, oh, hold on, like I am talking to people who are going to invest millions, into our fund. I need to show up a certain way, right? Or like the I'm talking to all the executives at Mayo Clinic, and I'm leading the charge here. Like I need to like show up in a certain way so that people respect the organization and respect me, and like all this stuff to motivate a team and build trust and all this kind of things. Um, I think the people that truly get it, like they're like, this is important to me, you know?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love how you also said if you don't have like a high end camera and if you have the bare minimum today, you said at least get an external mic. Is there one other piece of advice that you would give people that maybe haven't taken the leap yet, but you're like, hey, just like table stakes, if you're going to be on video, like do these 2 or 3 things to at least like be intentional about how you show up?
Yeah. So I would say this isn't, I guess, for everybody, but if you can afford it, get an actual camera, because you're going to start to see a lot of differences in the way that your webcam shows you. It's kind of grainy. Everything is super sharp, but like not like good sharp. It's just like everything's digital. If you can get a camera, it just changes the optics of what you can play with. And that's, I guess, more of an intermediate thing. But I'm trying to think of like one specific, I guess, gear related question or answer to give. But really what it comes down to is like,
Well,
pay
so you hit on
attention.
this earlier. Can I ask you
Yeah.
about like the sort of camera angle? Because I feel like for whatever reason, like if you get on a Zoom call with 10 people, which is like a regular Zoom call, nobody has invested in anything. everyone has a different angle, right? Like you have some people with eye level. I know you mentioned earlier, like, different angles on top or bottom. Like, do you feel like that's a thing on the short list of people? Like, hey, if you're going to get on a call, the Zoom call with your webcam, at least have it eye level, or what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. I was thinking about like what is a piece of gear that someone can buy, and I'm like, camera maybe. Yeah, like table stakes in that sense. Really just think through how you want to interact with somebody in real life. Like you're actually controlling how people see you. So some people that look up your nose, you're very imposing. Like you're like predatory almost, right? Versus like if you have the camera above you, like a lot of people have their webcam above their monitor. And especially the bigger the monitor, the more it's like we're looking over you. You're putting your viewer in the perspective of that they are your boss looking over your cubicle. And if you are trying to inspire your employees and you're putting them in that position where they're like looking over your shoulder or looking over you, it puts it in like you're saying I'm the leader, but you're putting them in a position that says you're my leader. It just kind of doesn't fit. And so exactly what you said, bringing the camera down to eye level usually is the best way to do it. One kind of shortcut is just think about how much you want to show up on camera. Some people only want to show neck and up for calls. Some people want to show more. And the more you show, the more you can use hand gestures and kind of be more in the space. And so think about, so for me, I want to show up here. So the halfway point is here. So I have my camera pointed, my camera is at the height of my sternum, right? But if I want to show up here, then I guess my chin is in the middle, and that's where I'm going to put my camera. So that way your camera isn't angled down or up, it's horizontal, and it's smack in the middle of what you want to appear on camera.
Interesting. Okay. I think one of the sort of superpowers of what you guys do is you provide like options, right? If you're not technical, here's like 3 options. Go like, can you just tell me about like the idea behind that? Like if you're just going to go sort of pro, intermediate, like how did you guys come about to simplify how to set it up?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people don't have not everyone has like a $10,000-$15,000 budget to like do like a world-class master class level studio. But there are so many different, it's more about the principles. Like that's what we teach to our students and our clients. If you understand the principles, you can get there even with like a light and a bed sheet. You don't need $1,000 light, right? Or with the camera, there are some limitations obviously on the technical side, but you can like solve a lot of these problems by understanding how to use the lens you have, or how to use the microphone that you have, or even how to decorate with the items that you have. And we didn't want to like kind of like say, hey, if you don't have the equipment, you can't implement the principles. So it's focused more on the principles. And another thing is like people are so scared to get started. We wanted to give people a reason like, hey, you can get started now given what you have. Because here's the thing, I think most people are afraid to invest in their setup because they think it's draining their resources. But the thing is, if you up your setup, you're going to get more resources because people are going to trust you more and buy from you more. Then you're going to have money to invest in the setup again. So instead of seeing it as like, I have to take money away from the business so that I can build my setup, it's like, no, I'm going to put money into the setup. Whatever I have, it's okay to build the business so it can produce more money for me. And then you can put that into the business again in other areas or put it back in your studio. Because like, what is a studio, right? It's again, it's showing up, and everything in a business is downstream from showing up and getting in front of people who need the service that you provide or need the product that you provide. And kind of thinking about it in that way, like it makes sense to just kind of think through, don't put any obstacles in front of you in this part of the process. So if you only have $1,000, even if you have $0, there's things that you can do to get started, and it's going to trickle downstream all the way down to your paying customers, all the way down to you having people interview offers if you're not an entrepreneur. All these different things will happen as a result of whatever you can do at the top, very top of that whole process.
I think that's like a big misconception. I think you hit on this throughout the course. It's more about the principles than just the tech and gear you have, which makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
All right. I wanted to ask you about some of your videos.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So you're going to USC. There's a graduating class, and they say to you, Kevin, we would love for you to show one of the videos that you've made, right? These are people who want to make a mark in this world. They're really eager. What video that you've made that's on YouTube would you want, this one video, which one would you want to show to that class and why?
Ooh. There's a couple that I would say are like the stereotypical, like this one's done really well, or that one's done like the cinematography and the editing is done really well in a certain like music video we made. Um, but honestly, like the one that comes to mind is one that I made. I actually made this for myself called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. Or I think it's called For When You're Not Okay. And it's a thumbnail, it's a blue thumbnail on my channel of like my friend drew me like in a cartoony way. Um, but it's actually a video that I watch all the time because like entrepreneurship is this thing where you're grappling with uncertainty all the time. And as just like as a person in other areas of life, kind of go up and down. Um, and it's one that I think best illustrates the impact you can have on a person because every time I watch it, it kind of has that effect on me where one it kind of goes through like me just kind of realizing like what this super cliched concept of self-love is. And it's like seeing yourself as someone in the third person, being like that person's trying their best. Like how would I love on them like I would love on a friend? You know, and seeing yourself and like giving yourself all the credit that you're not giving yourself normally, like giving yourself that sense of grace of like, hey, you're trying hard and like no matter what you do, I don't want you to put all this burden on yourself. Like I am freaking proud of you, dude. You know, and like I kind of like start choking up when I think about it, but it's like I think that's really the core of what it means to kind of like put yourself out there and like make stuff for the world. That's not just a hey man, buy my course and like yo, you know, the typical marketing bro kind of feel. And it's kind of like why I got into video in the first place.
Yeah, I thought like a lot of the messages that you have in your videos are sort of like great sort of self improvement, sort of in that category of personal growth. And I feel like, especially, you know, I used to ask this question all the time, like if you were to give a message to a graduating class, what would you say, sort of thing. And I feel like some of your videos are like perfectly made for people
No.
that are early in their careers, you know, and are maybe graduating in that sense. Okay, so what is the video that so if someone hasn't seen your videos, a lot of your videos, like you're sort of like creating video and content where you're out of your comfort zone. So I'm wondering which video or project of yours were you most out of your comfort zone and why?
Oh, hands down. And this is not something I've actually shared with anyone before, I think, especially publicly. Um, but I have a video called We Tried to Get Dates on Instagram Ads. And it's one that I was like, should I private on my channel or not? Because this is back when I was like, I need views. Oh my God, what nothing's working. What do I do earlier in my YouTube career? And I
By the
go,
way, I love that video. So like I thought it was just so like funny, but like, oh my God, like what's gonna happen? I thought you guys did a great job. So
thanks, man. I
yeah.
appreciate that. Um,
But
and
tell
so
us about it.
anyone who hasn't seen it, it's pretty much yeah, like I just asked my friend like like online dating is so hard. Like what if we just put out an ad on Facebook and Instagram and we're like, "Oh, that sounds scary." But like in that mindset at the time, I was like, "Anything for the views. Like let's do whatever." And I said, let's just do it." And also very much coming from the place of like let's grow as people through this
Yeah.
even though this is uncomfortable. I firmly believe that we're constantly growing and stretching ourselves. And the reason why that was actually such a hard video to make, which is something that took me a long time to like really grapple through, was because, and again, I've like never even told this publicly before, but like throughout my entire life, like I feel like growing up, it was very discouraged. Like don't date, like don't do that. And later I asked my parents, like, why was that such a big deal? Why did I felt like you guys didn't want me to date? And like that was not something that was, okayed. And they're like, we never told you that. How'd you get that message? Somehow internally growing up, I felt like it was not safe to put your feelings out there in that way, which is interesting because like I think I am a very feely person. But when it comes to dating, I just felt like, oh my God, like there's so much danger here, right? And to put that out publicly, I was just like dating was just such a very self-conscious part of me that I was just really struggling with. And so it was weird, like it was extra uncomfortable because of that sense of like you're putting your most vulnerable piece of you out there. Because your self-worth, more than how well your videos are doing, more than any stuff, like how lovable you are as a person was being put out there. And that like that was some of the hardest stuff that I've had to go through.
And
And
so people, there's dating app. This is only a few years ago, right? So there's
yeah,
dating
yeah,
apps out there, but nobody's doing ads on Instagram. Like it's like it's cool and it's funny, right? Like it's kind of designed to like be like, okay, like what's gonna happen? Like people don't
yeah.
do this, right?
Yeah, and it was just like weird. And so the whole time in my head, I'm like, this ad, you got to make sure people know you're not a weirdo. And so we recorded this whole ad, and yeah, sent it out to the interwebs and sent it out to Facebook and Instagram ads. And we had some people reply, and we said, hey, can you send this? I know what we're doing is super weird, but we're just gonna see if it works. This is like in the spirit of growth and learning. And we had a handful of people for me and my friend Alexa. I was like, hey, Alexa, can you do it with me? Because if it's just me, I'm going to look like a super weirdo. I need a girl to do this with
Like,
me.
yeah, you look less creepy with a female doing it with you. Yeah,
Yeah.
100% smart idea.
So we got like our what's it called? Our submissions in, and then we each picked someone to go on the date with. And then hers dropped out, and it was too late for her to like contact the people that she'd already rejected. And then we're like, okay, just Kevin, let's just go do it. And so I did it, and it was like simultaneously super uncomfortable, but also kind of a relief. Like, wow, this isn't so bad. Putting myself out in such a big way, and yeah, we did it, and it's documented forever on the internet.
Okay, that's awesome. I wanted to ask also, you had a video about not having your phone for a week, and I'm wondering, it's been a while now, and as you reflect on that video, what I'm two questions really. What is maybe the most important thing you learned from that experiment? And I'm also wondering if you've done it again.
Mm. So I haven't done it again purely out of, I guess, logistical reasons, or I haven't felt the need to do that. Um, but I think the biggest thing I learned was kind of like how much I go to my phone out of a reactive mechanism. So again, all of this stuff is kind of like internal psychological. I realized I would just go to my phone. Again, at the time, I was, still on dating apps and stuff. And so I was just like constantly like that was my like ADHD itch. Like whenever I was like bored or like doing something at work and it was hard, some people they go and they play Candy Crush or they check their Instagram. For me, it was checking dating apps because that would give me the most dopamine. And I realized those things that I would keep pulling up would just actually make me more disappointed because I'd be hoping for something that would get me out of this rut at work. Like I need a pick me up. And then the more you check it, the more often you open it and there's nothing there, right? Because just the more often you do it, the less chance there's something new there. And so every time I'd want to pick me up, it would like kick me down. And it sucked that like the itch that I had would send me to something that would bring me down.
Mm,
Because it wasn't that I needed that specific thing. In the moment, it's just like my brain is itchy. And this might be an ADHD thing where I kind of need more stimulation. And as I'm learning about my brain and how it works, I can feed it better things. Um, and I can't say like I have mastered that and like I'm a yoga meditator now or anything. But I've noticed there's other things that I do to ground me in those situations, which is, for instance, um, ask like, why am I trying to avoid this work right now? And
mm.
so for me, it's clarity, understanding why I'm doing this work in the first place gets me excited to do the thing rather than trying to escape it, right? And so I
Yeah,
try to design my life so that I'm chasing towards things rather than running away from things. Um, yeah, does that
love
answer
it.
your question?
It
Yeah.
does. Yeah, I love it. Okay. One more. So you interviewed a Hollywood voice coach, which I thought was pretty cool. What is sort of one thing that you would impart on people in terms of what you learned from that person around voice?
Yeah, so this was crazy. Back when I was working at our other company, one of our team members was a Japanese pop star, like an actual pop star on charts and stuff. I was like, this is so cool. And he's like, I kind of random tangent. They were going to send me to Richard Branson's private island to pitch our startup to him. And they're like, you're going to do the pitch. And if you need help, because I was terrified, like if you
Yeah.
need help, here's a voice coach. And he's the coach of like Maroon 5, Angelina Jolie, Bradley Cooper, like all these people. And I got to just like spend some time with him and I go, hey, I'm starting a YouTube channel. Can I record some of this stuff? And the biggest thing that I learned from him was like when you're using your voice, like he's a speaking coach, but he's known for singing. And I'm like,
Mm,
why are you teaching me how to talk? And he's like, it's the same thing. Like, oh, singing is the same as talking. What do you mean by that? And he's like, there's so many different tools we use when we sing that we don't use when we talk, right? So you use rhythm, the pacing of what you say can change how people interpret it. There's volume, right? And I could actually use a refresher to kind of improve on this myself again, but like there's volume, you want to modulate your volume and then modulate the pitch. When we're asking questions, we kind of go up, right? But when we want to make a point, we kind of go down like this, and then we pause. So there's different ways, and you kind of dance with it too. It's an art form. And so treating the way that you show up and talk similar to how you show up and sing is such an interesting crossover.
Super interesting. I thought that was like, especially in like a video first world, like your tonality and the way you speak, so much more important now than just being like monotone for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thinking about and reflecting on either like a setback or a failure you've learned the most from, what comes to mind?
Ooh, setback and failure. What comes to mind is this image that I feel like I had when I was trying to build this business, and it was a picture of like it was me just in this time. I felt like I was just holding a bunch of stuff on my shoulders, and nothing was getting any better, right? And I felt like I was kind of like Spider-Man after like one of his fights. I forget which movie, or maybe I'm making this up, but imagine him like under a bridge, like no one else is around. He just defeated the villain, right? In the middle of nowhere, and it's raining. And he's like, oh, I'm tired, I'm bruised, I'm bleeding. There's no one around. What do? You just pick the world up back on your shoulders again and keep walking in the rain. Like there's nothing else to do. And I was like, this is how I feel about this. And like that was one of the biggest like low moments for me. But what I found about it is like if you're really serious about like the ultimate thing that you're building is not this one at bat that you have. It's not this one business. It's building you as a person. Because I firmly believe that once you've built all the skills and mindsets of how to do something successfully, you become someone who can do it successfully. And like there's a process of that pressure that goes, this thing that you thought was true is not true, or this belief that you had is needs a little bit of tweaking. It's those moments of pressure where we think the world is falling down, that things aren't working. That's actually the biggest signal to us of like, hey, this is the part of your mental machinery that's not working. Like we've identified the biggest point of improvement. Let's switch it, and suddenly things are going to get better. And so I found that building a business, I can't say I built like a 9-10 figure business or anything, but like building our business so far, it's kind of like this reverse trampoline thing where every time you go up a little bit and then you think you have it, then you go down and you realize there's a piece missing. You're looking at rock bottom, just as about to hit it, you bounce up 2 times higher. You fix that one piece and you think you have everything built again, and then you kind of come back down again because you're missing the third piece. And every time you bounce 2 times higher. And so building a business is like, how can you decrease those iteration cycles? So in the beginning, I would be super disappointed for 2 months, discouraged for 2 months. And now it's like 6 hours because I know, okay, I'm back in the tramp. I'm about to bounce again, And so that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned.
It sounds like you're noticing that the dips are learning growth opportunities, not like, oh my God, this is like the end of the world for 2 days. It's short.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Is there a book that you've read that's made a big impact on you that you recommend other people read?
Ooh, strictly from a business standpoint, the E-Myth Revisited is really good. Kind of from a more just personal standpoint, there's a book by Alan Watts, which is a little bit more woo-woo than I thought it was in the beginning. I was like, oh, that's super woo-woo. What is this about? But it's about like our relationship to uncertainty. And it's a book called, what is it? The Wisdom of Insecurity, which I keep going back to it now and again, but I don't remember. I haven't read it recently. So it might have just been a book that was like at the right time for me. But it really helped to shape my relationship to uncertainty, which is the core conflict as an entrepreneur, right? So I'd say those 2 books.
Okay. This is awesome. I love how you leaned into it. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
Likewise, man.
I honestly really enjoyed this. Like I love hanging out and talking every time we do. And so thanks for having me on the podcast.